Another fascinating race with a dominant display from both Hamilton and Verstappen at the front of the race. We also had a return to the podium for Fernando Alonso for the first time since 2014. It was a great race and it leaves us with a fascinating scenario with both championships so closely contested with just 2 rounds to go. There's a lot to talk about, so here's my 5 things we learned from the Qatar Grand Prix. Let's have a look. My name's Andy and this is Behind the Drive. The top 2 disappear into the distance. Once again, Hamilton and Verstappen have shown why they are occupying the top 2 positions in this championship. Hamilton was so dominant all weekend and was phenomenal in qualifying with the British driver, ending up half a second faster than Verstappen in P2. And after the grid drop for Verstappen, it looked like the British driver would be disappearing off into the distance, but the Dutchman once again showed why he's in this championship fight, as he made light work of the 5 cars between him and Hamilton, and was running in P2 by lap 4. And from there, these 2 drivers were in a league of their own, with the huge gap to Alonso building in their pace being more than 2 seconds a lap quicker than the other top 10 runners. An incredible differential which saw them disappear off into the distance and build up a pit stop gap within 20 laps or so. It just looks so easy for them. From that point, with an 8-second gap between Hamilton and Verstappen, it was simple enough for Hamilton to just maintain the gap and mirror Verstappen's strategy for the remainder of the race. So really, it was a shame that these 2 weren't closer together, and had Verstappen have started in P2, there could well have been quite the strategic battle this evening in Qatar. But instead, the 2 checked out and disappeared off into the distance. They ended up trading the fastest lap point throughout the Grand Prix, and that competition was also cut short with the VSC at the end of the race. It was Verstappen that got that one in the end, meaning it's an 8-point gap between those 2 drivers with just 2 rounds to go. And the momentum is firmly with Hamilton and Mercedes, as they have that new engine from Brazil ready to go for the next race in Saudi Arabia in 2 weeks' time. It's going to be an epic finish to this championship. But for these 2 drivers, who are way out in front today, it's a deserved green box, as they were both in a league of their own in this race and throughout this entire season. Bottas loses out. It happens from time to time, but Bottas has had another dreadful start in his Mercedes car. Whenever he drops into the midfield pack, the Finnish driver tends to struggle, and with a dreadful start today, he got stuck behind Lance Stroll and Sergio Perez right from the off. He did get warmed up and made some progress through the field, on a circuit that actually looked quite good for overtaking, albeit with DRS overtakes down into turn 1. For me, it's an amber box for Bottas today though, after he did at least start to make a recovery drive. And once he got to 3rd with other cars around him pitting, he was looking comfortable, taking a bit of a gamble on those tyres to push for a one-stop strategy and potentially put the pressure on Verstappen even in P2. But it all went wrong for the Finnish driver after he suffered a puncture after 33 laps on those tyres. Those rough curbs have been car killers all weekend, with a number of front wings needing to be replaced and even 2 chassis ending up being cracked. The unexpected puncture was a huge blow for the driver after he was looking like he could have made the one-stop work and secure 3rd in the race, but ultimately it wasn't to be and Bottas ended up out of the points and out of the race. It was a real shame as we were certainly on for an exciting ending, as the top 4 positions were held by both the Mercedes and Red Bulls, but in the end the damage sustained was too much for Bottas's car and he retired from the Grand Prix in those closing stages. This was another blow for Mercedes and Lewis Hamilton, as he wasn't even in the race to try and take that fastest lap point away from Verstappen. Currently, Bottas holds 3rd in the Drivers' Championship and Mercedes hold 1st in the Constructors, but it's all getting very, very close with just 2 races to go. Differing strategies made things interesting. I've already mentioned the fact that this track was surprisingly good for overtaking, especially with DRS overtakes down into turn 1. And this was also helped by the fact that the likes of Sergio Perez and Valtteri Bottas had dropped back and had to work their way up the order. However, the other fascinating factor in this Grand Prix was the different strategies that the teams and drivers had gone for. The circuit's incredibly tough on tyres, the toughest of the season, with the corners mostly being medium and high speed. It puts a huge amount of load through the rubber, and this, combined with the fact that the track is new to Formula 1 and covered in desert sand, meant that strategy played a huge factor in the race in Qatar. There were differentials in terms of the starting tyre, and you had teams going bold with the medium tyres and trying to make them last to make the one-stop work, which ended up in a fireworks display for Bottas after his puncture midway through the race. It ended up looking tense for the rest of the one-stop runners, which included the likes of Fernando Alonso, Esteban Ocon, Lance Stroll, the 2 Ferraris and Sebastian Vettel. So it's clear that the one-stop strategy was potentially the faster option. But with 4 confirmed punchers through the race, it was touch and go as to see whether they'd all make it. But what's for sure is the fact that these strategic battles makes things interesting. It was a brilliant race to watch, and although the strategic battle wasn't right at the front like we'd have liked, it was still an excellent first race in Qatar. So it's a green box for the strategic element of this Grand Prix. FIA decisions. Next up is another key point from this weekend's running, and that's the decisions of the FIA. There's a lot to unpick here, but let's start with the incident that went uninvestigated at Turn 4 in Brazil. Coming into this weekend, Mercedes requested a review with new evidence. Given Verstappen's onboard emerged and showed his steering input, or rather the lack of, going into that corner. Now in my mind there was no doubt that this was new information. Michael Massey has even said himself that they wouldn't have had access to that footage until it could be downloaded from the car after the race. But the FIA made the decision not to accept the right to review on the grounds that the new information wasn't sufficient enough and wouldn't change their decision. So again, officially the incident was noted, but not investigated, and went down under the let them race principle. For me, this shows that fundamentally the decisions are most likely being made with the outcome in mind, something that the rules clearly state they shouldn't be doing. So this left everyone a bit confused, as a number of other drivers had said in the media that they would change their behaviour on track if Verstappen was to get away with that incident. So clearly other drivers on the grid would be aggrieved if they were subject to that kind of defensive driving and being forced off track like Hamilton was. And clearly this was a hot topic in the drivers' briefing, as Hamilton revealed that the FIA told the drivers that decisions could be different with different stewards, which I think everyone can agree is absolutely unclear. The rulebook is in place and there should be consistency amongst the stewards, or there should be a set of permanent stewards that attend each and every race. So once again, the FIA seems to have shot themselves in the foot with that one. But boy do I wish that the recorded drivers' briefings would return, as it would have been great to watch that one play out in Qatar. But then, there were yet more decisions from the FIA off the back of that qualifying session. Pierre Gasly's wing brake and subsequent tyre delamination meant he was stopped out on track, and it resulted in double-waved yellow flags at the start-finish straight. And rightly so. It's completely unsafe to have cars coming across the line at qualifying speeds when there's a car in an unsafe stationary position. But throughout the situation, there was confusion about what the state of the track was. You had green flags, yellow flags, and nothing showing on the dashboards of the cars. However, there has been a precedent set on this before, and that's ultimately that the marshals waving the flags dictate the rules to abide by. 3 drivers were called to the stewards, those being Verstappen, Bottas and Sainz. And they ended up with 3 different penalties, but at least this time it sort of made sense. Verstappen received a 5-place grid drop for failing to slow under the double-waved yellows, and the excuse of not being aware of the flags did not get him out of that penalty. Bottas received a 3-place grid drop for failing to slow under single-waved yellow, and again it was a cut-and-dry outcome. And Sainz received no further action on the basis that he did slow down in the mini-sector that the yellow flags were waved. So the rules were followed, but I have to say it was very disappointing to see these decisions not be made until an hour and a half before lights out on Sunday. There's definitely some improvements that could be made with these situations, where it was clear that a flag was out and the driver didn't make an effort to slow down. It seems like it should have been an easier call for the FIA to make, and it feels like the delay was a bit unnecessary. So ultimately, after all that, I think it's got to be a red box for the FIA. They've got themselves into some hot water with regards to this Brazil decision, and there's a lack of clarity in the rules. The confusion in qualifying is also disappointing to see. Why the yellow flags were removed in some parts of the final sector when Gasly was stopped out on track is still unknown to me. So there's a lot of improvement that the FIA could, and certainly should be making with 2 races to go. Alpine's brilliant race. It was a great result today for Alpine. I mentioned last week that their battle with AlphaTauri for 5th in the Constructors' Championship was well and truly on with 3 rounds to go. The 2 teams were level on points coming into this weekend, and with Gasly starting P2 and Alonso starting P3, it looked like there could be a brilliant opportunity to bring home a big haul of points for their respective teams. And the Alpine team took a huge risk going for a one-stop strategy from soft to hard tyres. It turns out it was a bit more of a risk than they might have thought, especially given they made their decision well before the punches of Bottas, Norris, Russell and Latifi. Towards the end of the race, Alonso was running in P3, ahead of Sergio Perez, who was forced to make the overtakes after being put onto a 2-stop strategy. And the virtual safety car to collect Latifi's car was probably a blessing for that team, as they ended up holding on to that P3. So the 2-stop approach ended up being a risk worth taking for the Alpine team, as it meant Alonso took his first podium since his return to the sport, and his first since Hungary 2014. And not only this, but Esteban Ocon managed to take a 5th position for the team as well, making it a brilliant weekend for the team with 25 points in the Constructors' Championship. I have to say Alpine have impressed me this year, particularly with that Renault power unit. It seems like it's been one of the most reliable engines of this season, and yes, their drivers will have been able to turn down the power units whenever they've been running out of the points paying positions, but regardless, it's been very solid for the Alpine team this year, and they've had the power to get the podiums and race victories whenever they've had opportunities like they had today. And Fernando Alonso has still well and truly got it. Even at the age of 40, he's proven that he can deliver top results. If he gets a fast car next year, you simply can't write him off. So of course, it's got to be a green box for Alpine after an excellent race in Qatar. Honourable mentions. Just the one honourable mention today, and that's for Aston Martin. Fortune favours the brave, and both of their drivers went for the one-stop strategy, with Stroll starting 12th and finishing 6th, and Vettel starting 10th and finishing 10th. A brilliant result for that outfit. So the three-continent triple header is over, and it's so close in the championship fight. It's going to be a fascinating end to the season. Let me know what you thought of the race in Qatar in the comments, and thanks for watching.